The key hit the table with a sound that made everyone in the studio freeze. Dr. Phil's hand shot up. "Stop the tape." His voice cut through the air like a blade. The cameras stopped. The audience held its breath. For the first time in 30 years of television, Dr. Phil McGraw walked off his own stage mid-taping, that key clutched in his hand. What happened in the next 17 minutes would change not just one family, but everyone who witnessed it. 3 hours earlier, the green room had been unusually quiet. Sarah Mitchell, 52 years old, sat alone with a small cloth bag on her lap. Inside it was the key. She'd carried it for 34 years, never once using it, never once letting it go. The producers had titled this episode, "Family Secrets Revealed." They thought it would be another emotional reconciliation story. They had no idea what Sarah was about to unlock. When the cameras started rolling, Dr. Phil opened with his characteristic directness. "Sarah, you wrote to us saying you've been carrying a burden for over 3 decades. Tell us what brought you here today." Sarah's hands trembled as she reached into her bag. "Dr. Phil, my mother died 6 months ago. In her will, she left me this." She placed the key on the table between them. It was old brass weathered by time. The kind of key that belonged to a door that didn't exist anymore. "What does it open?" Dr. Phil asked, leaning forward. Sarah's answer would stop the entire production. "I don't know. But there's an address engraved on it. And that address is where my sister disappeared 34 years ago." The studio went silent. Dr. Phil's expression shifted from professional curiosity to something deeper. He picked up the key, turning it over in his hands. The engraving was faint but readable. 1247 Oak Ridge Lane. "Your sister," Dr. Phil said quietly. "Tell me about her." Sarah's voice cracked. "Emma. She was 19. I was 18. We went to a party at that address. I left early. She didn't. The next morning, she was gone. Police investigated. Found nothing. My mother spent every day of the next 34 years believing Emma just ran away." Dr. Phil set the key down carefully. "But you don't believe that. My mother's last words to me were, 'The truth is in the key.' She wouldn't explain. She just kept saying it until she couldn't speak anymore." Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. He stood up, walked to the edge of the stage, and spoke directly to his producer in the booth. "Stop recording. Right now." Then he turned to Sarah. "We're going to that address. Today. With investigators. And we're going to find out what that key opens." The audience erupted. Some were crying. Others were on their feet. But Dr. Phil wasn't playing to the crowd. He was already pulling out his phone, making calls. Within minutes, he had a retired FBI investigator, a locksmith, and a local police liaison on standby. "Sarah," he said, sitting back down, "this isn't television anymore. This is your life. Your sister's life. And we're going to handle it that way. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." 2 hours later, Dr. Phil, Sarah, the investigative team, and a skeleton camera crew stood in front of 1247 Oak Ridge Lane. The house was abandoned, windows boarded, yard overgrown. It looked like it had been empty for decades. The locksmith examined the key. "This is a safety deposit box key. See the number here? 1247 isn't the address. It's the box number." Dr. Phil's jaw tightened. "Where's the bank?" It took 40 minutes to trace the bank. First National, 3 blocks away. The safety deposit box had been registered in 1991, 2 months after Emma disappeared. The name on the account, Margaret Mitchell. Sarah's mother. At the bank, the manager initially refused access. Dr. Phil didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "This woman's sister has been missing for 34 years. Her mother is dead. And that key in her hand might be the only thing standing between her and the truth. So I'm asking you, are you going to help her, Or are you going to be the reason she never knows? 10 minutes later, they were in the vault. Sarah's hands shook so violently that Dr. Phil had to help her insert the key. The lock clicked. The drawer slid open. Inside was a single envelope. And a VHS tape. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He looked at the camera operator. Turn it off. This moment belongs to Sarah first. Not to television. The camera went dark. What happened in that bank vault stayed between Sarah, Dr. Phil, and the investigator for the next hour. But when they emerged, Sarah was holding the envelope like it was made of glass, and Dr. Phil's face was set in stone. Back at the studio, with Sarah's permission, they played the tape. It was dated October 15, 1991. Emma appeared on screen, alive, speaking directly to the camera. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were haunted. Mom, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone. I need you to know I didn't run away. I witnessed something I shouldn't have. Something involving people with power. I've been told that if I stay, I'll be silenced. So I have a choice, disappear on my own terms or disappear on theirs. I chose to leave. I'm going somewhere they can't find me. I'm alive, Mom. But I can never come home. She paused, tears streaming down her face. Tell Sarah I love her. Tell Dad I'm sorry. And Mom, I left you proof. In the envelope. Use it when it's safe. When the people who did this can't hurt us anymore. The tape ended. Dr. Phil turned to Sarah. The envelope? Sarah opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs. Documents. Names. Evidence of a crime that had been buried for over 3 decades. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil didn't just hand the evidence to police. He called the FBI directly. On camera. And he stayed on that call until an agent was dispatched to the studio. While they waited, he sat with Sarah. Not as a host. As a human being. Your mother protected you, he said quietly. She kept this secret because revealing it would have put you in danger. But Emma made sure the truth would come out when it was safe. That's love, Sarah. That's family. Sarah collapsed into tears. The audience was openly sobbing. Dr. Phil handed her his handkerchief. The same handkerchief he'd carried for 30 years, a gift from his father. Keep it, he said. Your sister's story isn't over. It's just beginning. When the FBI agent arrived, Dr. Phil made one more decision that stunned his producers. He offered to fund a full private investigation into Emma's disappearance, working alongside federal authorities. This isn't about ratings, he told the agent, cameras still rolling. This is about finding a woman who's been missing for 34 years and bringing her home. The episode never aired in its original form. Instead, Dr. Phil created a 3-part documentary series following Sarah's journey to find her sister. The evidence from the envelope led to the reopening of multiple cold cases. 3 people were eventually arrested and charged. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. And Emma? 6 months after that key was placed on Dr. Phil's table, she was found. Alive. Living under an assumed name in rural Montana. She'd spent 34 years in hiding, terrified that the people she'd witnessed would find her. The reunion between Sarah and Emma was filmed, but it wasn't shown for another year, not until every person involved in the original crime was behind bars. Dr. Phil was there for that reunion. He didn't host it. He didn't narrate it. He simply stood to the side, watching 2 sisters embrace for the first time in over 3 decades. Later, in an interview, Dr. Phil reflected on that day. In 30 years of television, I've seen a lot. But that key? That key didn't just unlock a safety deposit box. It unlocked the truth. It unlocked justice. It unlocked a family. The key itself became a symbol. Sarah had it preserved in acrylic, and it now sits in the National Museum of Crime and Punishment as part of an exhibit on cold cases solved through family persistence. But more than that, it became a reminder that sometimes the answers we're looking for have been there all along. Sometimes they're just waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right question. And sometimes it takes someone like Dr. Phil to stop the show, break the rules, and say, "This matters more than television. This matters more than ratings. This is someone's life. And we're going to do whatever it takes to help them find the truth." That key changed everything. For Sarah. For Emma. For everyone who believes that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to surface. The episode became one of the most watched in DR. Phil's history, not because of shock value, but because it proved something fundamental, that media can be a force for real change when the people behind it care more about humanity than headlines. Sarah and Emma rebuilt their relationship slowly. 34 years is a long time to be apart. But they had something most separated families don't: closure. The truth. And the knowledge that their mother had protected them both, in her own way, until the very end. Dr. Phil attended their mother's memorial service, held a year after Emma was found. He didn't speak. He didn't make it about himself. He simply stood with the family, a silent witness to the end of a story he'd helped write. The key sits in that museum now, behind glass. But its legacy lives in every family that refuses to give up. In every cold case that gets reopened. In every person who believes that the truth, no matter how old, deserves to be found. And in a television host who proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop the cameras, step off the stage, and remind everyone watching, we're all human first. Everything else comes second. Years later, the impact of that single episode continued to ripple through lives across the country. The key episode, as it became known, inspired over 200 families to reopen cold cases involving missing loved ones. Law enforcement agencies reported a 40% increase in tips related to decades-old disappearances in the year following the broadcast. Dr. Phil established the Emma Mitchell Foundation, in partnership with Sarah, dedicated to providing resources for families of long-term missing persons. The foundation offers investigative support, counseling services, and legal advocacy, everything Sarah wished she'd had during those 34 years of not knowing. In interviews, Dr. Phil rarely speaks about the episode without emotion. "I've done thousands of shows," he once told a reporter. "But that day taught me something I should have known all along. Television is just a tool. What matters is what you do with it." The locksmith who opened that safety deposit box, a man named Robert Chin, later said the moment changed his perspective on his entire profession. "For 30 years I opened locks. After that day, I realized I was opening doors to truth." Every key tells a story. The FBI agent who took the evidence, Special Agent Victoria Ramirez, successfully used it to prosecute 3 individuals involved in organized crime activities from the early 1990s. She credited Dr. Phil's intervention as crucial. Without his platform and his willingness to go off script, that evidence might have sat in a box forever. Emma herself eventually agreed to a single interview, conducted by Dr. Phil 2 years after her return. She was hesitant, still processing decades of isolation and fear. But she wanted to say one thing publicly. "My mother saved my life twice. Once when she told me to run. And once when she left me that key so I could finally stop running. And Dr. Phil? He gave me permission to come home." The key now represents something larger than one family's story. It represents every unsolved mystery. Every family still searching. Every person who refuses to believe that time erases truth. Museum visitors often stand in front of that display case for minutes at a time, reading the placard that explains its significance. Parents bring their children. Students write essays. Advocates photograph it for their campaigns. But for Sarah and Emma, it's simpler than that. It's the object that brought them back together. The bridge between past and present. The proof that love, even buried under decades of silence and fear, never truly dies. And for Dr. Phil, it remains the moment that defined his legacy, not as a television host, but as someone who understood that some stories are bigger than the medium telling them. In the quiet moments after the cameras stopped, Dr. Phil made a promise. He sat with Sarah in his private office, away from producers and crew. "Your mother carried this burden alone," he told her. "You don't have to. We're going to see this through. Every step." And he did. For 18 months, Dr. Phil personally checked in with Sarah weekly. Not for content. Not for follow-ups. Simply because he'd given his word. When Emma was finally located, Dr. Phil was one of 3 people Sarah called. The other 2 were her father and her therapist. "You helped me find my sister," she told him through tears. "But more than that, you helped me believe she could be found." That belief, that stubborn, relentless belief that truth matters and people deserve answers, became the episode's true legacy. Not the ratings. Not the awards. The belief that one person, with a platform and a conscience, can change everything.